You can even start
okay,
with
I'm recording. Okay. You made me record because we were having an off mic conversation, as we always do.
always.
And, and they're so raw and real. We were talking about Leslie Odom Jr. and his demand for equal pay. And he said, if you're not going to pay me what the white boys are paying, then you're not going to have my services. And they could have replaced him. But they made a calculation. And now Disney went up 74% from that Hamilton, right? 74% Disney subscriptions came through that Hamilton piece being on Disney Plus, right? He said, I'm not taking peanuts for this. Right. The stage actors don't get a lot of money. People don't realize. Broadway, you're not getting a lot of money. So when they brought the cameras in, that upped the ante, and he was like, well, what do you pay white boys for doing live? Right. Let me see what the guy who did Grease got.
Let me reach out to CAA. That's all I want. Not a penny more.
Not a penny more.
Not a penny more.
And many of us are just happy to be in the door. Many of us are just happy to get a check that's so much more than what we ever got before. But if this is the standard, pay me the standard, not what my limit. And I was saying before we hit record that so many of us see ourselves through such a tiny pinhole that we don't even understand what our value is because we've been made to believe over a 400-year period that we don't have value. Our only value is in serving or giving over our gifts and talents to somebody else when those folks don't know how to do anything. They can't act, sing, throw a ball, dribble, think,
create incredibly complex systems that everyone can understand and build community with, because the Western education system and spiritual systems really are built on the idea of exclusivity and access. Everybody can't understand it. So you have to pay me. You have to pay the lawyer. Everybody can't get to God directly. So you have to come to me, the priest, and I'll go pray for you. Everybody can't be a person who is learned. So you have to come to the university or ask the professor or the expert. And of course, what we're showing every week is, no, if you have a brain and you have some access and some time to think and talk, then we all advance. As you were talking about Leslie Odom, and I was so encouraged because you know how I feel about Hamilton, but that's separate from the people who are in it. And I'm glad to see that brother do that. And when you tweeted it out, I read the article and I said, wow, but something you said is just so, everything you framed it with was important. That last line in your tweet where you say, make sure that you are so good at what you do, they can't replace you. And that's even just in that narrow lens, but they can't, they could have gone forward, but there would have been an outcry. And that would have been a headache. This is the day before they shoot. And so, you could try to replace Leslie Odom, as we know. I was a theater major in undergrad, so I know there's always an understudy, but it's not that person, and it's not the energy, it's not the magic. And then Karen, again, as we were talking off mic, you raised the issue of reparations and the idea that even that is being articulated in a very narrow framework. And you said something that I thought is just very powerful in terms of, that in that dimension of reparations that requires something from somebody other than us.
Yeah, I know because I've been reading a lot about energy because I need it, and we have a finite amount of energy.
Yes.
We don't have infinite. We don't have an infinite. You can take vitamin B12 shots. You can do all of the things there's a limited amount of energy spiritually that we have. So every day I get up, I have to determine, is this a best use of my energy? Right? Is this thing that I'm doing the best use to get me to where I need to go, right? Reparations are old. I'm so for it. I think it should be on a platform, all of the arguments. There's nobody that can argue against it at this point. But to demand something of someone that requires them to do something for you, that you have no power to make them do, and then pour all your energies into it.
Right.
When you could literally be pouring all your energies into building something for yourself, and when you're done, because really what I've learned, and this goes back to Leslie Odom, the more you perfect your craft, the more you are good at the things that you do, the more that you put into building your own empire, whatever that is, your family, what have you, the more confidence you have, the more security you have. And that energy translates. When you come into the room with that kind of knowledge that I don't need your check, I don't need your dollar, I don't need your job. The universe understands, and I've been in that when I was when I got $1 million from Bear Stearns to start my magazine, I was still at the Daily News, and I remember walking into my boss's office, and I'm like, I quit, and he was like, wait, what? Yeah, I'm like, I quit. I'm good. I'm good. You know that bank statement up there that says $1 million, that's mine. I'm out. Deuces.
See you.
And he was like, no, we need you. So all this time I've been here, I never heard those words before, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, huh. So I'm valuable? Okay. Because I don't need you. And this goes in relationships. You know, if you've been in a relationship before, you know, as soon as the balance of power, you know, when you don't need that person anymore is when they're like, oh, baby, blah, 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 you know.
Right.
So that light bulb went off, and he was like, I'm gonna hold your spot for you. Like, I want you to come back.
That's right. And then
whenever
walk away, you say, or I'm prepared to walk away. Well, I'm a professor at a HBCU, and I will tell you, for every faculty member, and I think this is generally the case in universities, but at Black colleges, you know, I've worked at white ones and Black ones, but at HBCUs, there's often the sense that the faculty are invisible. I laugh because I look at current college yearbooks at HBCUs, particularly, you know, like where I work, and there's not even a section in there for the faculty. It's almost like students come and they think the university is them, you know, engaging with each other and commingling, having parties and fun and planning, doing internships. Then they leave as if they never came through a classroom. And this isn't a critique of them because they're children. I mean, 18, 22, they're still developing. They're young adults. They're coming in. But what you said is so important, because the things that we take for granted are the things that really are our most valuable things. And when you talk about reparations, as it has reached now the white-facing part of the public sphere, it's being articulated exactly as you have described it, as a presentation of a bill for services rendered, and the bill is the amount due, or trying to figure that out. And that's very important work. What it does, however, is betray something that is critical for us not to miss, because it's grounded in exactly what you just said. That is not the long arc of the reparations movement in the Western Hemisphere. The reparations movement was never and has never been grounded completely in a demand for compensation. The reparations movement, of course, the root of the word reparations is repair. And when you look at the reparations movement, we go back to Callie House, Isaiah Dickerson, the ex-slave mutual relief and pension fund in the late 19th century, early 20th century in Nashville, Tennessee. That was their headquarters. Mary Frances Berry wrote the book, My Face is Black is True. That organization of Africans who had been enslaved. So people say, reparations, y'all asking now, why didn't y'all ask? No, the demand was made right after enslavement, really before the end. But they set up an organization that did two things. While they were making the reparations demand, they were doing mutual benefit, because they said the act of repairing ourselves is our reparations. We owe ourselves repair. And so while we're repairing ourselves, we're gonna make this demand of you, but do not mistake the demand we're making of you from our reconstructing our foundations, our community. And so when you talk about energy and limited amounts of energy and the importance of being able to stand on one's feet, that was really and remains the engine that generates the field of energy that is transferring all that stuff off of us. That is the history of the reparations movement. So these current conversations about how would you pay, how much would it be, what would you use it for, how would it be distributed, all that stuff is external facing. And that really, and it's interesting, it's all very important work, very valuable work, but it is not coming from the long organized community tradition of reparations. In fact, the National Coalition for Blacks for Reparations in America just had their conference a few weeks ago. And, you know, I've been a member of NCOBRA for a number of years. And they have, and they're not alone. I mean, this is basically the reparations movement. The articulation of what we demand begins with what we demand of ourselves. And I thought it was very important that, you know, when we were talking before today, and you said, you know, we should start exploring African religions. Let's talk about ways of knowing. You know,
I'm smiling right now because all I'm thinking about is Kwanzaa, right?
Oh, interesting.
And so I don't know if you can see this book.
But you see it? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I got my copy around here somewhere. No question.
All right. Battle. All right. So this
right,
is,
right. Book battle. That's y'all love. This is what we do.
So I don't know where I got this book. I think someone gave it to me. I think someone gifted it to me, and I started reading it recently. And this is Maulana Karenga, of course, the father of Kwanzaa. Feel whatever way you want about it. There's value in everything. And so let me just pause here for a second, because I think, you know, we get caught up sometimes and hung up on people and personalities and egos, and you know, the whole world is a battle of ego and id and figuring out, you know, all of that. And so I'm a chew up the meat, spit out the bones type of chick. You know, I'm going to take value from whomever I can get value from, wherever I can get value from, and if it's not valuable, I'm going to toss it aside. But I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, never, because there's value in everything, right? So I say all of that because some people have problems with Karenga. I do not. I think Kwanzaa is a very, very powerful, beautiful, conceived notion of how we as a community should see every single day of our lives collectively, because there's power in that as well. And getting back to Leslie Odom for a second, you know, he did something that I think paved the way for other people. There are times when somebody's going to step forward, like a Leslie Odom Jr. or a Colin Kaepernick, but how much more powerful would it have been if everybody on Colin Kaepernick's team took that knee? You know, I'm watching now. It's popular now, right? But he lost his career.
Everybody's doing it, and the man still didn't have a contract. Right.
Right. But if everybody got together in a room, like, and this is the frustration that I have, because at every turn, as soon as we get a little bit of momentum, there are all of these fractional things happening. It's like, can we pull it together for just a month, for 1 year, with one solid focus? If everybody, yo, I'm kneeling for this, you see what's happening, and then everybody, like that team, that college team, said, we got to get this president out, we're not playing.
In fact, the University of Missouri, what was a concerned student in 1950. In fact, you know what? People think I have these, like we playing this, but we don't. I think I don't know if I see it over there right now. I thought I had it back on this shelf. It's probably on one of these other ones over here. But there's a book. Clarence Gaines was the first Black student admitted to the university. Sorry, not Big House Gaines. Oh wait, is his name Clarence Gaines? Big House Gaines was in North Carolina, the basketball coach. No, I think Clarence Gaines, I had to look him up, stop looking him up. I think he was the first student admitted to the University of Missouri, Gaines, because Gaines is the name of the Supreme Court case that was argued. That's why when the University of Missouri students had their movement out there a couple of years ago, they called it was led by these young brothers and sisters who called it Concerned Student 1950. I think that was the hashtag they used to spread the knowledge, because Clarence Gaines actually never, oh wow, I don't know, Karen, I have to look it up now, it's gonna stick in my mind. I think it was Gaines.
I'm sorry.
But no, because it's important, because that was the name of the Supreme Court case. It'll come to me in a second. And Gaines, by the way, they think he moved back to Chicago. He disappeared from history. No one knows what happened to him, where he lived, whether he lived, he died. Nobody knows, because he never finished. In fact, the name of the cultural center, the cultural center at the University of Missouri is named for him. And they defaced the sign, that kind of thing. But to your point, when those football players, because of course Mizzou is one of those big time college football programs, when those football players said, yeah, y'all beating up on these students out here, you're beating up on these white co-conspirators or allies or whatever you say, you're beating up on faculty who's out there, but guess what? We're not gonna play. And then you look and say, okay, the Black player's not gonna play? No, and guess what? Those white players are with them too. Okay, this guy gotta go. The chancellor of the University of Missouri system said, okay, we gotta do something. But what that required was a common cause, a common purpose, and an agreement that whatever our differences are on this issue, we will come together. 1972, Gary, and I'm looking forward to the day we have a conversation about Black politics in the context of this common conversation. In 1972, and Gary,
Lloyd L. Gaines.
Lloyd Gaines, not Clarence. Clarence Big House Gaines, exactly what you said. That's your area down there at Tobacco Road, in North Carolina. No question. It was, yes, Lloyd Gaines. That's why if I could see that book.
I just didn't want it bothering you. I already know your brain would have been like.
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about, thank you. That's how we vibe. Y'all know this is how we work. So, yes, Lloyd Gaines. That's right, Lloyd Gaines. So the thing is, they had a common objective. And so like in 1972 in Gary, Indiana, and we'll talk about this and looking forward to this conversation, everybody's in the same room in Gary. The Black politicians, the Black nationalists, the Pan-Africanists, they're trying to put together a common Black agenda. It doesn't hold together very long. By 1974, the Congressional Black Caucus has backed out, this kind of thing. But for that one moment in time, they're discussing unity without uniformity, like we talked about, a little while ago. And one of the people, Maulana Karenga, involved in these conversations, is very famous for saying, we can have unity without uniformity. And yes, there are many people, myself included, who have real challenges with other individuals. It could be Karenga, it could be any number of people we can name, and we all have that challenge. But at the same time, what we can acknowledge is when you see a ritual like Kwanzaa, and I love it when people say, well, Kwanzaa is a made-up holiday. And I say, you're absolutely right. Very quickly, or take all the time you want in the world. Could you name one that isn't? And then, but it is so, yes. So, I mean, you stop making points that are not points. But Karenga and the folks that were organizing with him in Los Angeles in the 60s, coming out of students in his Kiswahili class at LA Community College, organizers who out there have been in study groups for years, the African American Association, there's a number of different people, because the same little study group that produced some of the momentum that led to what became known as the organization US was the same study group that produced the momentum that led to the West Coast articulation of something that started in Lowndes County, Alabama, which was the Black Panther Party. It's the same little group. So when we look at Kwanzaa, we're looking at the creative genius of one person, but we're looking at the creative genius of one person who is in conversation with other people, because you can't celebrate no Kwanzaa by yourself. And the organization that was created, that kind of it was the place where Kwanzaa gestated and then emerged in 1965 and 66, that organization was named US. And then anytime I read a book or article and somebody's talking about the organization US and they say, oh, US, which meant United Slaves, I have to resist the urge to close the book, because now I know here's another academic who's not part of the community, who doesn't know the history, who didn't try to find out the history. US doesn't mean United Slaves. US meant us. As opposed to who? As opposed to them. So the whole line is, whether you're in Missouri with some football players and you say, who is us? Us is us. Or most importantly, whether you have a cultural grounding informed by your deep commitment to community, your understanding of how we relate to each other in time and space, regardless of how we agree or disagree on specific points, us means there is an us. And the reparations movement was always grounded in how do we repair us, which is why the external facing dimension of the reparations movement that we see, the most visible now, which really doesn't have anything to do with the reparations movement in terms of a long arc of movement. It's contributing to that movement, but it's not part of it. You can tell that it's not part of it by how it's being articulated. Everything is based on, well, this is the promise of America, and if we do this, who is we? Oh, us. Who is us? Well, us is United States. Oh, I see. So us is not what we talking about. Us is something you're trying to articulate that has never existed. There is no us there. And so one of the most complicated and difficult conversations for us to have is this conversation around what we believe. So when you show that Hosea, I mean, you're looking at Karenga trying to take some ancient Egyptian principles and articulate them for a new generation. Now, when he's writing that, interestingly enough, this is around 1983, 1984, when he's writing the Hosea, he is in conversation with a small group of Black folk in Chicago who are really there it is right there, you see it, absolutely, who are really the kind of intellectual center of that idea that we can go into the ancient Egyptian dimension and begin to learn from our ancestors. That small group of people in Chicago, led by a guy, Jetty Shimshu Jehudi, that was his Kemetic name. His name was Jacob Carruthers. Jacob Carruthers, Rickety Wimby, Yvonne Jones, Mae Roosevelt Roberts, they began learning hieroglyphs. So this isn't you know, they're going to meditate and the glyphs going to come to them. I'm not discrediting that as a form of knowing, but I'm saying, no, we need to learn this language, because in the words of Jacob Carruthers, we need to speak to our ancestors without interpreters. Karenga becomes interested in that and begins conversations with Jacob Carruthers. And so Carruthers is really the major figure who even brings Karenga into that conversation. And so what the Husea is, you'll notice in the Husea, if you flip through there and look, you're not going to see any glyphs. Do you see? I mean, look there right quick. And let me take 10 seconds.
That's why I wanted to bring it to you. And let me, while he, okay, he's
I'm listening.
going to get books. How about this, man? All right. No, I'm not. I'm going to wait for you to come back, because I want to tell you why I wanted to have this conversation, because we were going to talk about something else today.
Yes, we were.
But while you're walking to find a book somewhere.
I got it.
All right. Okay.
I keep all my Carruthers stuff together. He was on my dissertation committee. Jeb Carruthers is one of the great influences in my life. In fact,
everybody volunteering to catalog Dr. Carr's large library there. He knows where everything is. Mind your business.
Right. That's
Mind
right.
your damn business. All right.
You know, we could just, at some point, y'all, you know, when I get this into a big space, we have everything up, because most of this stuff is not here. As I say, it's in storage.
I imagine you doing something like that, brother, in Chicago, a whole library, because I think you have enough books to do that. And it'll be the library, and I'm going to help fund it. Yes, we're going to help fund it.
We definitely going to do that. I laugh because Theaster's, the Johnson Library, when I went the first time, and the dude was in there sorting books, and I'm looking up, I would say probably, and I told him, I got about 90% of these books, and this is a fraction of my. So yeah, when we get this arsenal together, they coming to us, Karen. We're not going to them anyway.
No.
So go ahead.
Before you get to Carruthers,
yes.
About almost 15 years ago, when I was at the Daily News, maybe it was 20 years ago, when I was on the editorial board, we got to tour the Hayden Planetarium before it opened, the new Hayden Planetarium.
Yeah.
And at the time, Neil deGrasse Tyson was the curator. He was the person, and so he was the director. He took us around, and at the end of the tour, we were in this giant theater, beautiful amphitheater, and the seats went back, and there was this film about the Big Bang and the founding of the universe, right? And it was just amazing. You know, you get the stars and then the planets, and then and it was narrated, I think, by James Earl Jones. It was beautiful. And I sat there, my breath taken away, and afterwards, and it was just us. It was 7 of us and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I said to him, okay, I get the Big Bang. You don't believe in God, right? He doesn't, he's an atheist. That's fine. And this is a conversation that I want to have, because you and I never really talked religion before.
No,
I don't know where you sit on it, and it doesn't matter to me, because I'm going to love you no matter what you believe. So I'm going to say that out loud.
No question.
And I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. But I said to him, okay, Big Bang, during this film, it talked about the catalyst. There had to be a catalyst, right? There had to be a catalyst in order for those things to happen, and for this Fibonacci mathematical perfection to form all things from seashells to pomegranates to this earth, right? It's all math.
Come on.
The number, right?
That's right.
I said, what was the catalyst? And he said, we don't know. We don't know what the catalyst is, but mankind is always seeking, and then they put God in the place of the things they don't know. So that's the classic atheist answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the record, I believe there is a higher power. I believe that it is not a man or a woman, and I jokingly say she, which is blasphemous, but I don't care, because it's a power that requires all of us to participate to be really powerful. So I just want to say that. And it's been a journey of mine for the last, I want to say 20 years, to really discover what the meaning of life is, which I think most human beings try to find out. Why am I here, right?
Right.
When I picked up the Hosea, and again, I was baptized, went to church. I even was part of a very strict, such a strict church that it was called the cult at some point, where I did Bible study on Monday, Wednesday, we had tests. Friday, we had Bible. I mean, it was like intense, study the Bible with people. So I'm immersed in this. I open up this Hosea. In the first chapter is a story about the creation of the earth that is very similar to what is in Genesis. And this, I think, is about 2,000 years older than the Bible. So it made me beg this question, Doc, because part of these sessions that we do on Saturday is about freeing people, freeing their minds, getting folks to critically think about everything that we do. As Black people in America, the Bible has been used to indoctrinate, enslave. It has warped our view of everything. It has made a lot of us wait for the afterlife, for heaven, and not live our best lives here. Many of us go to war over this Bible. We hate people based on their belief system. You know, there are whole countries blowing each other up over this word that started in Egypt. As I'm reading this Hosea, I'm saying, so if these are all stories, these are fables, these are fake stories, but you put so much faith into it. And if we strip it away, I understand your whole bottom falls out. Your whole bottom, you don't have grounding.
Right. That's what the Nationalists used to say. Nationalists say, if you take somebody's Jesus, you better be prepared to leave them something there. You can't just snatch something and not have anything.
So what do we do with this? And we're gonna have, when we go live, I want to have a real conversation about. We're just dropping breadcrumbs today, but I wanted to start with Karenga and the Hosea, because as I'm going through it, even this part where, because I dog in my books, I know you probably have bookmarks and highlighters and stuff, but I'm a page. Yeah, I'm in back pages. But in the book of wise instruction, which is Proverbs.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. What you have in your hand is taken from books that fed those other books. Now you know where the Bible came from. It's right there. That's why Exodus makes sense. No, that's why Exodus makes sense. Moses, the name Moses, the Egyptian closest correlate in terms of kind is Mesu, right? MSW, and he was an Egyptian priest. I mean, even Freud talks about that. There's a whole body of literature. I mean, the guy did not speak Hebrew. I mean, in other words, think about even in the first 5 books of the Bible, you know, when you go to Genesis and Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Exodus is the bridge between the Egyptian and what comes after. It's actually very simple, and the theologians don't have a debate about it. In the ancient Egyptian language, Mesu means to be born. It's a simply word, Mesu, and you see it in a lot of people's names. Jehudi Mes means born of Jehudi, this kind of thing. Moses is raised in the pharaonic house. He's raised as a prince. He's raised in the royalty. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how is he talking to these Hebrews? He learned the language. If these Hebrews were in captivity, we ain't gonna read the Bible as a history book. John Henry Clark said he can't do it. But I didn't want to interrupt you. Please, because it is a book of faith. And this is the important thing to, as you say, as you're about to get into. So I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to make that point that you're raising. You're reading things and they look familiar because that is the parent. You're reading the parent of what we have in this book. But of course, it doesn't end with the first 5 books. Now you get into the politics of the region, kings and Daniel and now you're getting into the politics. And then, of course, they have to do what? They've got to build a bridge, because this entire document is not coming out of the first of the Abrahamic faith traditions, out of Judaism. It is dictated by the second to emerge, which is Christianity. So in order for Christianity to emerge, you got to tie it to all that other stuff. And where do they do that? They don't do that in the Old Testament. They do it in the first pages of the New Testament. This is the bloodline, the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And then they tie Christ through the begets all the way back and say, now that we've done that, let us move on. It's like, wait, you tied these holes with this little thin piece of, yes. Because everything they said was going to happen in the Old Testament is going to come to pass, but this guy had to come. What is this guy? Zeers Miles? Is not Zeers Miles. Jack Miles wrote a book called Christ, A Crisis in the Mind of God. I mean, the whole idea that in order to tie us together to a divine purpose in these ways of knowing, in these particular faith traditions, you've got to have something that bridge. And what is the bridge? Somebody that's human and divine. Which is why the Africans, once that kind of concept leaves Africa, comes through Europe and comes back into West Africa and is used to justify enslavement, the Africans looking at these Europeans, the Portuguese, they're looking at the Catholics, really, is what you're talking about, Portugal and Spain. They're looking at them like, hold on, you saying this guy is divine and a human? They say, yes, like that's a revelation. The Africans looking like, duh. First of all, why did y'all split the divine and human? We all divine. I mean, the way they were able to sell the Africans on Christianity was to say, oh, is that what y'all believe? Yeah. Okay, well, guess what then? Jesus Christ, he's an ancestor. And they said, oh, okay, we understand that. Because you can't convert people in Africana ways of knowing that come out of the continent, spiritual traditions, you can't convert them to your belief system because there's a very simple principle that's in operation. There is no access to divine except through your ancestors. Because for them, they say everything that happened is like a speech. And that speech comes down through time and space till it reached me. And so I am the speech of my parents. In other words, when that egg and that semen came together, that was the speech of two people. I am that. And their grandparents, the speech, all the way back to the first speech, which is not an explosion. See, y'all will watch this and say, we planned this. We did not. Neil deGrasse Tyson, of course he is not an atheist. No, do you say atheist or agnostic?
I don't know what, I know he does not believe that there's an all-powerful God. Does he?
Yes,
right,
he does. No. I'm not talking about what he said out of his mouth. I'm talking about what
I'm thinking I and the Father are one.
Right.
I and the Father are one. It makes sense. So today I wanted to just, again.
Keep talking, because I'm going to pull this book to show you why he can say what he believes.
Okay,
go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to have this conversation with Dr. Carr and with everybody, of course. It's because I think so many of us are rote believers. We follow the letter and the actual Bible as if it is factual. And I'm not saying anything blasphemous, but I'm saying that there's a spirit in all of us that if we release it, oh my God, the possibilities are endless. And I think we're all handcuffed and enslaved and in bondage to a word that came from Africa that was stolen. I'm just going to say it. Stolen and put into other books to control people. I said it out loud. At me at Karen Hunter on Twitter. All right.
Now, Karen, you should, I don't even know why. This is the thing. We talk about a Big Bang. That's a theory. That's why I call it the Big Bang Theory. For the Egyptians, they say, of course, this is what, maybe 6 millennia before you get any of this bang stuff. They're saying, no. Everything that exists now always existed. All it has been doing is changing form. This is Egyptian theology. And so their thing is, what we experience now as part of the speech of this constant rhythm, this constant vibration, this radiation of everything that exists, what we are experiencing in our limited glimpse is part of that process. And so, I mention this because it's very important. They say, in the beginning, there was darkness, there was movement, and you couldn't distinguish. We were in it. We were all in it, but we were not in the form we're in now. And then there's a moment when there is a speech that emerges out of that. They call that moment the pre-speech, the noon. N-U-N is how we were spelling in English, but if you saw it in the glyphs, it's pictures with waves of water. Now, for those of y'all who've watched Beyonce Black is King, the water is at the beginning. And when she says to the baby she's carrying down the beach, you're bigger than a Bible verse, you ain't know what, she is putting a comedic marker down, because of course that's how Genesis emerges. There's darkness moving on the face of the deep. They took that from the Egyptians. Then God, then whatever we call the creator speaks itself into existence. That's still in Genesis. But the Egyptians are like, yeah, in fact, let me go to, many ways, the teacher of Maulana Karenga, Jacob Carruthers. This is the book right here, Medu Neter, Divine Speech. This is the one. Jacob Carruthers, I love this brother right here. Jacob Carruthers is from Texas. He went to Phyllis Wheatley High School, who's one of their rivals was, of course, Jack Yates High School, where Big George Floyd went to school. He's from Houston. He was one of the first Black students to integrate the University of Texas. His friend was Hyman Sweat versus Painter, the law case that they argued to get into University of Texas. He dropped out of law school. He said, I can't stand this segregation stuff. Went and got a PhD at University of Colorado Boulder. One of his childhood teachers at his undergrad, Sam Houston College, Houston Tillotson now, was James Farmer Sr. That was the character, of course, that Forrest Whitaker played in The Great Debaters. So he's all dyed in the wool Black. His father was Church Christ minister. So he came up like we in the church, and he was a PK. You understand, preacher's kid. So Carruthers gets fascinated with Egyptian language later in life, in his 40s, when he's in Chicago working at the Center for Inner City Studies. It's now named the Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. It's a brilliant. He is really, in many ways, the hub of an intellectual network in this country that takes the study of African culture very seriously and ancient Egyptian culture through language very seriously. That's why I bristle when people say hotel. I'm like, yeah, that's a very important word, and I know why it's used, and I understand the critique. In fact, I embrace the critique because we got to be better than that. But playing with that language allows us to evade the deep intellectual work. So let me just show you what Karenga is drawing from and puts where we can get it in English. Corella's gonna put it in English too, but he gonna put the glyphs with it. So when you see here, he puts the glyphs, he translates. So he says, when speech happened or came into being. This is from what they call, this is the Egyptian concept of the Sept Tepi. He says, the Egyptians say, what happened the first time something happened? In other words, that's what we're looking for, origins, right? What happened? Because something had to happen for us to get here. I know how my mother gave birth to me, and she and my father had sex. I know what that. So what happened the first time? The Egyptians say, Heper Medet. That's a transliteration of the glyphs. Heper is a glyph. If you saw it, it's a picture of a little bug, like a beetle. They call it a dung beetle because this beetle rolls. It gives birth to eggs, and it puts the eggs in the soil, and then it rolls the soil into a ball. The ball is actually dung from the beetle. That's why I call it a dung beetle. And that ball of dung protects those eggs, keeps them warm until they are born. They come out of that. The Egyptians say that's a metaphor for, in other words, that ball, that represents the noon. That's the stuff. And so he says, Heper Medet, translated into English, when speech happened, came into being, the universe belonged to me. I existed alone. Who is that I? That's that I that the Rasta's talking about. I and I, meaning we, meaning us. You, me, the computers, the laptops, everything, the dirt, the birds, all that stuff is I. I and I. It's I. He says. Then the next line, which is in it, Ray, I won't do the transliteration. I'll just read the English. It says, I am Ray in his first appearance, or its first appearance, really, more appropriately. Ray, meaning what? I am the sun. Because they're also looking at the earth. And they say every morning that big fiery ball come up, and every night it goes over there. So this has been happening forever. And then somebody say, yeah, but it had to happen the first time at some point. They're using the sun as a metaphor. Again, when people talk about African religion, are they worshiping it? No, everybody shut up. Because what you scientists have now discovered, call yourself discovering, is it's all connected and there's dark matter and yeah, guess what? The Africans knew that a long time ago because they have the first human beings. They've been looking at the stars for 100,000 years. Do you really think you, who've been doing this for about 75 years, know more than them, and you think you reading these stories like they're children? No, they have reduced it so that a child can understand it. So they're not saying the sun is God. What they're saying is this form of repetition is the form of reality. Everything repeats. One day the sun is going to burst and the earth is going to burn up. The Egyptians are like, everybody calm down. Are you going away then? Yes. No. You are part of this cycle. This thing is going to come back. Oh, I see. Now y'all want to make movies about it now. And time travel. And yeah, Matthew McConaughey is talking to his daughter. And the Egyptians sit there like, yeah, they catching up. It's going to take them another 100 years though. They really are struggling because they won't connect. What they've done is separate science from religion. And that's why I say Neil deGrasse Tyson can say, I don't know, or no, you're a scientist, which means you do believe. Why? Because if you didn't believe, you wouldn't keep looking. Why? Because you, as an article of faith, have taken it that there's some rhythm to this. And even when you say there's chaos, well, if there's chaos, you should go into another line of work. Because no, you know that. And in fact, this is where I want to go. I'll end with this very quickly. He says, and in fact, the first occasion is when you have the first speech. And like I said, we just dropping breadcrumbs today. We could talk more about this. When you see at the beginning of Black is King, Beyonce walking with that baby down the beach, and you see those elders there, and you see the sisters with the stuff on their head, and she says, you bigger than a Bible verse, and then she connects it with a gloss. And I don't know this, I don't know her, but I'm listening to her, and I'm listening to the way she's narrating this, and it's absolutely the Egyptian thing. We came out of everything that already existed, and the moment of speech does it. And then she says, you are great, and then she says, and I'm thinking, in ancient Egyptian language, means great. And I'm saying, this child, somebody, she's trying to, because then she gets into a Cyrus knot, but here's where I want to go with it. Let me look at when this was published. This book I'm about to show you came out in 2012. Okay, yeah, because I call her my child. She's my blood child, but this is my girl, Shanice Thompson. She's a professor at Bowie State University, but I had Shanice since she was 16 years old. She's from North Philly. She was my Freedom School kids. And she got so caught up in studying the Egyptian language and so caught up in studying her history and culture, she said, I want to come where you are. So she left. When she graduated from high school in Philly, she came to Howard on full scholarship. She was Gates Millennium Scholar. And then she left there, went to Boston University, got a master's in African American Studies, then went to Ohio State and got a PhD. And in fact, I went out for her dissertation defense last year. She did her dissertation on Beyonce's Lemonade, and she tied it to the Orisha and the Yoruba. And now she's teaching at Bowie State. This child from Philadelphia, working class family, but this is the point. Anybody can do it. But the reason I bring it up is because Shanice was an undergrad when this book came out. I'm about to show you. The Smithsonian Museum of African Art, and they do incredible catalogs. And when we talk about religion in depth, we're going to talk more about it. This is their catalog that they had an exhibition called African Cosmos. African Cosmos, Stellar Arts. The lady who was the curator who kind of edited this volume was still at work. I don't think she's there anymore. Christine Kramer. I knew this catalog was coming out. So I emailed Christine Kramer and I said, I'm down there all the time. I usually go on the weekends. I just hang out in the Museum of African Art. By the way, people can't get into the Museum of African American History and Culture. Don't be disappointed. Go over to the Museum of African Art. It is where that other museum begins. In fact, there should be a real partnership between those two. Because as John Henry Clark always say to us, if you start your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. No, start with the African stuff. You won't understand anything in that African American museum and that African museum is rarely visited. It's like, where are all the people? We should be starting here. So this exhibit came out. I emailed her and I said, I want to bring my class down, Dr. Kramer. Oh, yes, please come. We would love it. She said, I'll walk you through it. I said, yeah, because I have a lot of her catalog. She does a lot of important work. She was like one of the content people at the Museum of African Art. An Africanist, knows a lot of stuff. So I bring the students down. Shanice is with me. Some of the students are in Mario Beatty, including Shanice, are in Dr. Beatty's Egyptian hieroglyphs class. Maybe about 10 or 15 of them. I got about 40 students. So we come down. She meets us. She's all happy. A little white woman. I mean, very, very, hey, I said, so nice to see you. Okay, yes, come on. So we start the exhibit. The first stage, the exhibit African Cosmos is about how African people look at what we would call astronomy. This is where we're going to tie Neil deGrasse Tyson in. Right? So they start the discussion, which has got the Zulu, the Akan, the Yoruba, all over Africa. They got pieces from the museum because, see, the thing to understand about African religious traditions, what we would call religion, we'll talk about that in a minute, that word really doesn't fit because they don't separate science and sacred. They don't separate any of that stuff. So you got to look at the art. You got to listen to the music. You got to see the dance, and you will see, and you got to look at the science. Metallurgy. There's a whole exhibition catalog on iron, for example. That's the latest one they put out. That when we talk about this in depth, we had to get into that because iron for them, iron is a metal that replicates or is symbolic of blood because iron is in our blood. It's like iron is the metal we use in the material world for things that we're duplicating from the human body and the spiritual world. So if you're going to be a blacksmith, you have to be initiated into the spiritual traditions. So let me finish. I'll finish the story right quick. So the thing about Kramer and them and the African Museum generally, because Janetta Cole was the director at the time. And I would see Janetta Cole, Dr. Cole, sometime I'd be in the bookstore, she'd come in right quick. And I always knew Janetta Cole, had something to do with the books because they had some of the best books. And I said, Dr. Cole, I know you in here picking these books. And she said, yes, I always make sure that we have the most important. I said, I know, because you're anthropologists. You know what I'm saying? That's why you want educators in charge of education institutions. So at any rate, we're there. We're in the first gallery. Dr. Kramer, this little lady, white lady, she says, and this is the Egyptian. The Egyptians believed that Ra, the sun god, and then we let her talk for a while. And here's a little picture, you got one of the papyrus there, and they're talking about inhabiting the heavens, this kind of thing. And so as she's talking, we let her talk about 4 or 5 minutes. And she said, let's move on. I said, hold on, Dr. Kramer, could we stay here just for a second? She said, yes. You have questions? I said, no, I just want to check something. Now I could read what it wrote, but I said, Shanice, what that say? Shanice starts translating the glyphs. I am the divine when I happen, speech itself happen. This professor, Christine Kramer, one of the leading authorities in African art in the world, she's like, you can read that? Shanice never looked back at her. Yeah. And then and she said, and I'm not alone. She looked around and for the first time in the tour, she could see us. Going back to the Leslie Odom piece, we don't need you in this exhibit. We're very glad, and thank you for putting this catalog. It's very important. But please understand that what Jacob Carrellas used to teach us, African people must break the chain that link us to other people's ideas and talk to our ancestors without interpreters. In other words, Jacob Carrellas would say, you know, it's one thing if you got to read this in English, but once you understand what you're looking at, these other people can come. We want you to learn. But what we're not going to do is trust what you say about my mother. I'm going to talk to my mother without you. I don't need you as an interpreter. That's the same way. Go ahead. That's what I said. And this is science.
Oh, I'm watching your time because I know you have to go.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, but this is important. I mean, yes.
No, this is important, but we have next week, you know, and we'll continue it. And, you know, for all of the people out there that want us to continue, tune in, subscribe to the channel, share this information, continue to support what we're doing, because this is a journey of freedom, and I feel very strongly about it. And one breadcrumb at a time, we're gonna get there. But just trust that we got your best interest at heart too, because there's a lot of skepticism around, you know, why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of seeing folk in bondage. Freedom is like clean water. The more you drink it, the more you need it, the more you want it. And we gotta keep putting the clean water in front of people. So when you drink that dirty water, somebody else's interpretation of you spit it out and come over here. We got you.
That's
Dr. Carr, you are, as people keep saying, a national treasure. I couldn't agree more.
No,
I love your t-shirt.
no,
I love everything about you.
Let me say this, because I know we getting ready to line up, but I should do this since we're on this subject.
Go. Not because I can stay here all day with you.
Oh, well, if we take another 10, 15 minutes, I think I'm okay if that's all right with you. Okay. Just for a minute. Okay. The reason I want to say is because this is important for us to understand, because I don't know, like when we go live, had this conversation, like you said, people gonna have questions. We're gonna be talking to each other, figuring it. So in this moment, like you say, everything's, in fact, what the Egyptians would say is everything is in divine order. They have a concept, ma'at, usually depicted as a woman, which, because she is a woman. I mean, but to your point, God has no gender. In fact, one of the creation stories, they say by the time you get out of that noon, that water, and the speech expresses itself, there's a moment in creation where the divine beings began to emerge in a kind of anthrocentric form, so we can recognize them as human. Now, whether that happened in reality or not, all the Egyptians are doing is drawing it to give us something we can put our mind around. What the theologian Howard Thurman would say is the purpose of religion, which is to give human beings a handle to move around things that are too big for us to understand. This is all religion is. Y'all telling stories so you can get a little handle, so you can put a grip on, okay, well, I can see this guy. I can see Mary. Okay, yeah. Did she live? Did she not live? Don't get in no debate about that. This is a story to help you get your mind around the broader concepts. So in the Egyptians, they would say one of the stories is that the figure comes out of this noon and masturbates. So you have a phallus. The masturbation produces a seed, which the figure then swallows and becomes pregnant and gives birth to, no. See, the reason why it's confusing is what the Egyptians are not going to do is make God a man. And what the Egyptians are not going to do is make God a woman. What the Egyptians are going to do is say there are opposite rhythms and forces. That's what rhythm and tension comes from. So in our physical bodies, it's expressed as female and male. But please do not confuse the way we look and the way our expression of reality is with the ultimate reality. So if you got to have man and woman to explain it, no problem, because we can see man and woman and we can see birth. So let's use that as the point of entry to go back to the rhythms, because we're all, and the Congo people in Central Africa would say, in fact, my man, I had this book. I pulled it because I knew we were going, let me see if I can find it right quick. If I can't, we'll just keep going. Oh yeah, here we go. My man, Baba Fukiao. Kimkwandende Fukiao. This is Fukiao right here. Baba Fukiao. He's an ancestor now. This is his book, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo. He's from West Central Africa. Fukiao would say that the way human beings exist, we exist in and move in a series of waves and radiations. And everything in reality is radiating. The Egyptians would agree. They say, yeah, everything is moving all the time. The scientists would agree. Neil deGrasse, universe is expanding. Okay, you don't have to use the language of expansion, brother. Just say movement. The Egyptians wouldn't conceive of an idea because then the child says, Dr. Tyson, yes, I got a question. What is it expanding into? In other words, what's out there beyond the expansion? The Egyptians was like, see, y'all messed up. Just say everything that is always was, and it's not expanding, it's just moving. I mean, in other words, stop trying to reduce the universe, just say movement. So the Congo people would say, you're absolutely right. People live and move in an ocean of waves or radiations. And then what Baba Fukiao says is, in Congo spiritual traditions, which are part of a larger group of Bantu spiritual traditions, Central Africa, Southern Africa, he says, you know, my people believe that human beings are either sensitive to the vibrations and radiations, or we're immune to the vibrations and radiations. Meaning what? The vibrations and radiations is going to be there regardless of whether we acknowledge them or not. We're part of them, but we're either sensitive to them or we're immune to them. If we are sensitive to them, we can react positively or negatively to them. If we are not sensitive to them, then we need to begin to try to get more sensitive to them, and that is the function of education. You see, I mean, see how the Africans got this thing? They say, no, the thing gonna happen whether you in it or not. And so when I hear you, Karen, saying it's in divine order, everything, yes, the Congo say, that's an African right there. That's just, she understand. You can react to it positively and negligently. So anyway, Carruthers, at the same time that just around the same time that Husea came out, Carruthers was finishing putting together lectures he had been giving for about 10 years in Chicago at a place they call the Kemetic Institute. Still exists. I'm a member of the Kemetic Institute. So they're still there. All the people who are still there. His wife, Ife, Muriel Bala, so many others. These are the Africans in Chicago. And so he said, I'm gonna publish these lectures. Karenga, by then, really in conversation with Carruthers. You know, and then again, this is mouth to ear history. In other words, this ain't something I read in a book. I sat in Jay Carruthers' study many a morning. He's an old farm boy, which means he would go to bed 10, 11 o'clock at night. We'd be up talking, whatever. 5 o'clock next morning, Jay Carruthers is downstairs at his study writing on some yellow legal pad. The sun would rise on Jay. Remind me of Toni Morrison. Ms. Morrison, I get up for the dawn, I write into the dawn. He was the same way. So at any rate, Carruthers, you know, has written these essays. By then, Karenga, they're in deep conversation. And so Karenga has a publishing company. In fact, who published that one, Karen? Did you see?
This is the University of Sankore Press.
Just like you always talk about, own your own thing. They own that us owns the University of Sankore Press out of LA. And here's a book. Sankore, that's right. Sankore. Okay, the University of Sankore Press, except this one, Essays in Ancient Egyptian Studies, Jacob H. Carruthers. So the University of Sankore Press publishes the Husea the same year that Carruthers publishes what gives us the tools for understanding where the Husea work came from. He goes through essays, Ma'at, the African universe, orientation and problems. He says, the problem we have, and this is something you see repeated in a lot of other books, a lot of scholars, is the problem of time and space. How are we orienting ourselves? For the Yoruba people, in fact, it's interesting. I was reading something the other day in another book on African religion. Let me see if I've got, yes. This is Okat Bitek, Decolonizing African Religions. Bitek here is a brother out of East Africa. This was republished actually by a cat who, my man, Kwasi Kanadu, who used to teach for Bureau Manhattan Community College now. He's in the city colleges now. He's in city college. But he republished this. This has an introduction by the famous African philosopher, Akan philosopher, Kwasi Wiredu. And Kwasi Wiredu says, you know, one of the problems we have with African religions is that we try to translate and interpret them for Western consumption. And some things just don't translate. He said, so for example, when you say being, like philosophers, because people will try to separate religion and philosophy too. And for the Africans, you know, and Wiredu was a trained philosopher, but Wiredu was like, you know, see, when you say like being, he said, my language, Akan language in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, that really doesn't translate, because the question they're gonna ask you is, well, being what? Being when? Like, you just don't say being. You know what I'm saying? I mean, being is not an abstract concept. You gotta relate it to something. And so like going is a form of being. So you say going, and if you say going where? Where we going? I mean, in other words, you got to tell me when and where. So when Carruthers in Ancient Egyptian Studies writes about orientation, he says the first thing all human beings have to do is orient ourselves in time and space. And somebody might say, and I won't get too abstract with this, so I want to make this example I'm about to say. Some people might say, well, hell, you know, yeah, but I understand this African stuff, but we Americans, we Black Americans, what that got to do with it survived in the language. If you get, there's a number of good books on this, but I see this one over here on the shelf. If you get
what's in your pockets?
Huh?
In your pockets.
Yeah, right.
You got your pockets, Doc.
You got your pockets, right. No, but I some of the books, you know, I keep around, and it's funny because I'm sure people think, well, y'all must rehearse this, and then you set up your bookshelf. No, this is divine order. And my thing is, as a teacher, you know, I'm looking forward now. The coronavirus has shut down the campus of Howard University. We're not going back to January of then. So my thing is, I've never had time to just sit with the books and work. And so I thank you for these conversations, because that's where I'm moving now. That's the next phase. We have to do that. I'm gonna pull a Leslie Odom too, but anyway, that's whole nother. In other words, you're gonna look, we're gonna respect the tradition, the genealogy. So this is Lisa Green. She's a linguist. This is her book, African American English. She's a great linguist. I've never met this sister, but I really have so much respect for her because she writes a grammar of what we would call Ebonics, or what the linguists would call AAE, African American English. And in one of the sections, she talks about the verb to be. And she says in Ebonics, to say to be has to be translated through these English forms that are really African people taking English and fitting it to purpose. So if you say, for example, man, that lady, she be tripping. Oh, that's incorrect. No, it's exactly correct, because be has to be oriented in time and space. Meaning what? She tripped yesterday, she tripped today, and she gonna trip tomorrow. She be tripping. In other words, you can't say that. You can say in English, she is tripping. Well, that means right now, right? Yeah, is she gonna trip tomorrow? Well, if she does, she will be tripping. Oh, no, y'all stupid. Give me them 2 letters and I'm gonna fix this. She be tripping. In other words, so I mean, this is philosophy. So don't. And what Lisa Green's point is, and not just her, so many of the others, John Rickford, so many other linguists who touch, John Bow, all people writing about African American English, including the ones who coined the term Ebonics. That came out of the Association of Black Psychologists, actually. Robert Williams writes about it in his book. You know, they were in 1972 in St. Louis, and they said, we need a word for African languages that we have had to hide under and remix with English and French and Spanish. He said, so don't orient them, don't call it Black English. Let's come up with a word that you can use for any of the languages, English, French, Spanish. What about patois, any of them, right? So what if we had a word that focused on us and then how we apply our kind of grammatical remixes to these languages? Okay, let's make up a word. Fine. Ebony, that's us. Phonics, that's the sound. Ebony phonics, Ebonics. That's what that word means. It's not Black English. It's Black Spanish, Black Portuguese, Black, you go to Brazil, they got Ebonics in Brazil, the same. And so then you can hear, and this is what Lisa Green talks about as well. You can hear, it's not just the grammar, it's not just the vocabulary, it's not just the idiom, words like ashy and kitchen, which we remix to use because we are Africans. So somebody got to get in that kitchen. Somebody thinks, well, I'm going to that part of the house. Oh, no, you don't speak Ebonics. I was talking about hair. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's ashy. What, is something on fire? No, I'm sorry. You don't speak Ebonics. I'm talking about you need some lotion. In other words, so it's not just those. It's also phonology. It's the sound. So if you in Kingston, Jamaica, if you in Jersey, if you in West Africa, and a sister says, if you speak Ebonics,
right. If you suck your teeth.
Suck your teeth. Right. Somebody talk, baby, I was home last night. And suck your teeth. Somebody who doesn't speak Ebonics is like, oh, well, does she believe him? An Ebonics speaker from 3 different places speaking English, Tree, and Spanish and Portuguese. All 4 of them sisters look like, what, you didn't hear what she said? Oh, I'm sorry. You don't know the sound. You don't know the gesture. You don't speak Ebonics. And the point is, that's an intellectual tradition. And so anyway, I'll conclude this. Carruthers and Karenga collaborated. Karenga published Carruthers' essays in the Egyptian studies. Then the following year, this is 1984, 1985, they get together with a number of Black folk from all over the country. The East Coast comes, Yosef Ben Yakinen, John Henry Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Leonard Jeffries, all these people, the First World Study Group in Harlem, African Echoes in Newark, all these people come. The Southerners come, Asa Hilliard, Nia Damali, Larry Oberdelli Williams. The only time Sheikh Anta Diop ever visited the United States, he came to Atlanta, came to Morehouse College. All those black people that put that together, they come. The Midwesterners come, Jacob Carruthers, that whole crew from the Kemetic Institute. The Southwest people come, the West Coast people come, and Zinga Heru, my man, who am I thinking about? LeGrand Clegg, who's still alive, still fighting. He was the city attorney at Compton. They meet up in Los Angeles, and they form the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. And these are the conference proceedings, Kemet and the African Worldview, published, Sankore, you know what I'm saying, and edited by Karenga and Carruthers. See, so people talking about hotel, everybody slow their roll, understand. And you know what they did? The first thing they did was say, we are activists, you got college professors, but mostly you got bus drivers, you got day laborers, you got sisters who, in other words, these people are regular black folks who say, we taking the study, we doing what we do every Saturday. They said, we're gonna meet up here, and ASCAC not only still exists, the president of ASCAC right now, Mario Beatty, that's the dude who teaches Egyptian language. I'm the first vice president. I took the role after Asa Hilliard made transition in the Nile Valley. We were in Egypt at the time when he passed away. My point is, we now have people who are dedicated to that. So when I look at Beyonce, I just smile because I know that she has been influenced by people who are actually doing the work that we're doing. This isn't all surface stuff. And so it's important to understand that African religion is misnamed. It's an attempt for us to articulate our worldviews in a language that people are familiar with because we had to learn that language. But if we were talking about it, and we will talk about this together, of course, if we were to talk about it in a more plain language sense, in fact, maybe this would be for today, and we can end with this. When we did the curriculum in Philadelphia for the high school class, because now everybody in Philadelphia has to take a high school African-American history class. But I'm not a historian. I'm training Africana Studies. And Africana Studies, very simply put, is raising the question, where is Africa in this? Where are African people? Where are African ways of interpreting phenomena? So it isn't just studying Black subjects. It's studying everything through the lenses of our people. So people say, is astronomy Black studies? Yeah, of course it is. Why? Because we had ideas about the cosmos. Can I show you? We got a book on that. In other words, don't think of Black studies as it's got to involve a Black person or Black music. No, it's how do African people think about themselves in time and space? Problems of orientation, as Carruthers would say. So we're debating how we're going to put this curriculum together. We've already conceded we can't get a textbook because none of the textbooks we like, and they're going to buy the textbooks anyway because textbooks is $1 million business. So let's not focus on the book. Let's focus on the questions. If we can ask the right questions, the students will go find the answers. So we'll talk about, like when we talked first time we met, we talked about those questions, right? Let me focus on just one of those categories that we talked about before, ways of knowing. Because we came to the question of, well, how do we get to asking what Black people believe? Because we know Black people believe a lot of different things. Well, we can't call it religion. That's too small. We can't call it science in the sense that's education. Okay, you know what? Let's call it ways of knowing. How do we know? Because as Baba Fukiya would say, among the Congo people, if you're not in tune with the vibration, if you're immune to it, your job is to get in tune. In other words, the process of learning is the process of you connecting to yourself. Why? Because you're in the vibration. You're just immune to it right now. The more you learn, like you said, when you open you see it, you said, oh, this is why. Yeah, you're getting in tune. That tune is coming. It's here. and that's why I think that's why what you propose for us to have a conversation on religion, it's very exciting because everything we do is there.
Thank you. Well, we do have to disseminate and dissect Beyonce's Black is King. I couldn't finish it. So
Me neither. No, I haven't finished it.
No, I couldn't finish it. That's different than I haven't finished it.
No. I'm saying, you know what? Give us a tease. Why couldn't you finish it?
I watched it at night and I couldn't go to sleep on the darkness. And so you need to carry me through what I was actually seeing. And maybe my vibration isn't vibrating it was too many what I call demonic things that just ran counter to where I am right now, and I couldn't embrace it. So
Hey, sis.
let's
Well,
have a conversation.
the reason I ask is I couldn't finish it either, but I couldn't
Okay.
finish it. I think it might be that we might be in the same mindset. It's just that we may articulate it slightly. One of the reasons I couldn't finish it, and I got to go back and finish, is that it was too busy. You know how somebody learns something and they want to tell you everything they know. Right? I love this. There's a passage in the Odu Ifa in the book. And mind you, Africans really don't have sacred books. A lot of the stuff that we're calling sacred books, including that one, the Hosea, that Hosea, Karenga brilliantly put together pieces from thousands of years. They didn't have a Bible.
Hold on. Let me just, and there's a reason for that. Because knowledge is for everybody. Yes. Nobody has to galvanize and then tell you how you should follow knowledge. Like there's something inherently evil about you putting things in a book and then cherry picking and then telling us how we're supposed to follow knowledge when everybody's on their own personal journey.
That's right.
That's some bull crap. So I'm grateful that you said that. Thank you.
No, it's true. No, it's true. And that's where I'm going with Beyonce. In the Odu Ifa, which Karenga did a version of Odu Ifa. He learned Yoruba, and the dude is brilliant. I mean, whatever you think about it, otherwise. But I prefer some of the other translations. In fact, one of my very good friends at Howard, who is a Babalawo, Wande Abambola's son, Kola Abambola. Wande Abambola is one of the great Yoruba Babalawo. His son teaches at Howard, and Kola always tells a story. As a little boy, he wanted to be a Ifa priest. He wanted to be a priest like his daddy. So he would follow his father around. He would say, "I'm going to be Ifa priest." And finally, his father, one of the world's great Ifa priests, he looked at his son and said, "Son, that's what you want to do? To your point, it's your path. It's your Ori. It's your destiny. It's your work on your character, your Iwa. So, but I'm not going to tell you to do that. In fact, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go out, because you've seen me. You've seen us. I want you to go out and study these other people." Kola got 2 PhDs and a law degree. He went out and studied everybody else. He said, because what I don't want you to do, I don't want you to embrace this without being sure that this is the best thing. And after all that work, he came back to his father. He's a Babala, because the African traditions could not, these other traditions didn't compare. They're valuable. He learned from them. He discussed them. He talks about ethics and European philosophy, ethics in the law. He and I, had a great conversation. And he teaches, he said, but let me be very clear. The tradition of my people, the Yoruba people, they're as good or superior to anything in the world. And if you come to me and say they're not, let's talk about the one you want to bring to the table, because I've studied. My father sent me out of his study. So, you know what I'm saying? And this is why Black people, please understand, we don't take no L's for nobody. We are the parents of every human being that will ever be on this ball. And to your point of reparations, yes, they owe us, but guess what? We owe ourselves to remember. The first repair is self-repair. And all that energy gonna leave up off us, and we'd be like Leslie Odom. So what I wanted to say is we were finally, so in this conversation about religion and spirituality, thinking about Beyonce, it becomes a situation where I'm learning this. I want to share it with everybody, but the Odu Ifa, some of the ritual traditions that you have to learn, these chants, the Babalawo got to know the stories. There's a line in the Odu Ifa that says, when you acquire knowledge, you don't have to speak it at the same time, all at once. He said, because you don't have to use up all the spit in your mouth to make a point. And so looking at Black is King, I'm looking at the images, I'm looking at all stuff, I'm saying, sis, I admire the fact that you are deep in this thing, but let's be very clear. It hasn't cooked long enough for you to be able to be. And so what people are receiving, it's like trying to drink out a fire hose. Wait, I got to turn this off. Right. And I had to do the same thing you did.
Okay, all right. I'm glad it wasn't me, and there's no hate, no shade.
No, respect.
I will say what I said. What I said. We're gonna have this conversation next week.
Yes, please.
Thank you. You are 23 minutes past your deadline, and I apologize.
Right. No, don't apologize. I did that because you had the time. You were the timekeeper. Dr. Clark, when he was a little boy in Alabama, he was the timekeeper. That's why when he passed, I did a talk in Detroit just after the funeral. It's called Requiem for a Timekeeper. The most important person often is the timekeeper, because they keep us in time and space. You tried to stop us. I ran on. I'll pay the price for that, but I appreciate and love you because you always managing. Yes.
Dr. Carr, follow him, Africana Carr, on Twitter. He will respond. He's that person. Subscribe to the channel and share this with everybody. All right.
Yes.
Love you guys. Love you.
Love you.